Times has changed now to what they used to be. You know, they used to go to school and they'd walk to the schools 2 and 3 miles. And then they'd have a big Christmas play on Christmas. And they'd have signage, you know, they'd dress and hand the presents all out in a big tree, you know, and hit full of toys. And the children, they enjoyed it. They'd have speaking and singing. And they just really enjoyed that. But now anymore, see, they all go on the bus. They don't walk and go now, and they enjoyed all of them walking, being together, backwards and forwards to school. It's about, well, the schoolhouses used to be all around, and then they all sent them out of town, you know. They don't go to these schools, houses like they used to.
My name is Anders Mather. I was, rather shamefully, deeply asleep when Loretta knocked on my door at 11 this morning, and I had to make some hasty excuse about a late night of correspondence to deflect her worry for me. She informed me she thought there was an air leak around the bottom plate of the schoolhouse stove, in a place that is difficult to tighten up, and that the fire was actually running too hot, with the students sitting close, getting too warm. She'd briefly left the Nately girl to oversee them as they began their lunch. I nodded, apologized awkwardly for my unshaven appearance, and followed her out into the cold to cross to the schoolhouse and attempt a repair if need be. I was immediately struck by the stark melancholy of the sky above us. Its color made me hesitate on my front step. The unbroken whiteness of the snow on the plain sat in dramatic contrast to the bruised, almost sedimentary dark above the horizon. I have lived in the county long enough to know that what I was looking at was normally only a harbinger of a short burst of warmer weather, but I have never overcome the sense of loneliness that such a forlorn sky instills. I caught up to Loretta as she crunched through the shallow snow cover in her gleaming white boots, still a bit nervous in my presence just 3 months into her teaching contract. She was plying me with small talk about the Nately girl's forceful personality when I noticed that the sky was clearly darkest over the school, which soon appeared over the slight rise to the east of my little house. This made me genuinely uneasy, and I did not hear everything Loretta said, and perhaps responded to her inaccurately. Far to the north, the top of the Wilsons' roof was faintly visible, as always. Beyond the copse of trees, Major Wilson kept swearing he would cut down, merely to vex his shade-loving sister-in-law. Aside from the teacherage beside the schoolhouse, the Wilsons' home was the only structure in sight, some distance from the silent dirt crossroads. Kimmy Wilson, their spunky 10-year-old daughter, had the shortest walk home of all 19 of the county students. The views to the east and south were interrupted only slightly by minor deviances in the smooth, rolling terrain, including King's Pond and the ever-struggling apricot orchard. Loretta said something then that neatly broke my fixation on the sky. "The doves are being odd," she remarked in an offhand way. I asked her to repeat this, as despite her youth, her breathing was becoming a bit labored, and I hoped I hadn't heard perfectly. And so again, "The doves, they're being odd." There were only 2 of them at the moment of Loretta's revelation. They were circling the school grounds in a low, lazy spiral, each giving the other much space. It could have been mistaken for a mating ritual, or even a kind of quiet play. Mourning doves they were, with soft brown bodies. Their arc was very wide, encompassing the entire property, which only through the study of age-tattered documents could one learn stretched from the playground to the dry stream bed behind the teacherage where Loretta lives. She stopped walking when she noticed I had stopped in my tracks, watching the doves intently. They looped again and again, only about 20 feet off the ground. From Hatcher Wood they had come. Loretta did not know what to make of this curious and, perhaps to her, somewhat precious behavior. I could not take my eyes off it. "Is everything all right?" she asked me, confused by her employer's distracted and distant ways. She already knew I drank, spent almost all my time alone, and had been performing my duties as school superintendent indifferently. "We've got to be quick," I told her curtly, and strode ahead of her into the schoolhouse whose heating problems had become almost legendary across Carswell. Even as I touched the old chipped front door pull, I saw that 4 more doves had joined the active circle, again creating admirably consistent spacing for the other flying creatures within the living loop, as if a patient jeweler were fashioning an ornamental wedding band. We went inside. Soup was being heated in small tin cups on the top of the pot-bellied stove, and the smell of stewed tomatoes hung in the air. The children, having formed small groups, both sitting and standing, for their lunchtime, became quiet and deferential immediately upon seeing me, and I greeted them in a typically subdued way. Little Carl Robeson stopped in mid-bite at his desk, setting his sandwich down and gawking at me with his sad, round face. I noticed Amy Byatt, too, head down in intense concentration, a single plump carrot and 3 biscuits from her father's farm sitting beside her open book. Clever Amy, who, Loretta said, recited so flawlessly, but was vexed and frustrated by numbers to the point of despair. I went directly to the blackboard, where Loretta had listed many facts about the history of Europe, and turned to stand at the lectern as she rested a hand on Nicholas Berg's shoulder to nudge him to stop talking, turn around, and listen. She was visibly confused that I had strode right past the stove without a second glance, and assumed her traditional position up front. Outside the window to my right, I saw that the number of doves in the broad aerial circle had increased again to 10 or 12, their formation without flaw. "We're having an early dismissal today," I told the students. "I'm worried the weather is about to become severe, and a snowstorm could catch us." At this, a couple of the younger children were unable to completely contain their excitement, while the 2 eldest, Becca Nately and Kevin Point Carr, merely turned to the window almost in unison. Loretta left her spot and moved in that direction, clearly unconvinced. "Look at the birds!" piped Deanna Ellis, age 6. Most of the students were seeing them now. I cleared my throat for the second time and told them that I and Miss Norrow would be walking everyone to the crossroads, and from that point I wanted them to get home as quickly as they possibly could. There wasn't much time, I said. Everyone was first to gather in a single group in front of the schoolhouse, and then I would give the next instruction. I was not good at all at hiding my fear, I understand now. I think it made the children more well-behaved, but frightened the more sensitive ones. Coats were clumsily donned, books were packed up. Carl Robeson was trying to fit his left mitten onto his right hand, and an exasperated Becca corrected him. As I began to move to the front door again among the shuffling students, Loretta came close and reached out to glance my elbow ever so delicately. "It's almost 40 by the thermometer, Anders," she said to me, finally using my first name, as I have always urged her to do. It was clearly a gesture of gentle concern for my state of mind. I felt I had to be terse to save time. "You've never heard of a helmsman's front?" I replied, to which she of course said no, for how could she have heard of something I had invented on the spot? "The doves are confused because the barometric pressure is changing too fast," I said. "We could have a blizzard." That left her no effective argument. We were out the door then, she holding it open for all 18 children to pass through. Only one was absent today, Angela Altman. A light fever, her brother reported. When the children saw that the doves had now collected in an encircling mass thick enough to make counting them a fool's errand, there was chatter and worry as well as awe. For the doves did not go around and around at tree height or higher. They kept very, very low, now maintaining their pattern only 4 or 5 feet off the ground. The bulk of the schoolhouse and the belfry atop it concealed the eastern section of the giant ring from our view. Dozens of other birds continued to join from the direction of Hatcher Wood, descending unhurriedly and merging into the circle. The birds were no longer silent. They had begun to coo and squawk as if communicating some urgent message. "If they stay low, we'll run through them, but only when I say," I announced to the children, even as I helped one of them, whose face I did not even see, push her hand through her coat sleeve. Loretta assisted by telling them the doves were confused, but they would not hurt us. Deanna Ellis looked doubtful, and I saw her turn to her 7-year-old chum, Lydia Banker, for comfort that was not there. Franklin Gustafson, age 12, squinted elaborately at the birds, mouth agape, and tugged at his ear. "Why is our part of the sky so dark?" he asked. The patch of ugly discoloration directly above the school had taken on a distinct shape with notable edges, describing a soft, flawed triangle, perhaps a 1/4 mile in diameter. This aberrant phenomenon was a familiar one to me, yes, but no one else, not even Loretta.
Anders, my hand won't come free.
Kevin Point Carr had begun in fascination to drift several steps away from our gathering and toward the developing border the birds created, and I chastised him more harshly than I meant to, commanding him back because I needed his help. With Loretta's obedient assistance, I began to split the students rapidly into 3 groups based on my memory of where each child lived. I had to be corrected twice, first by Loretta and then by Amy Byatt, when she realized she was being overlooked entirely. I knew that Tom, Dell, and Becca arrived at the school by sulky 3 days out of 5, living as they did all the way in Frostmas, but they were old enough to do without, if need be, and did not question. It was not at all possible to summon their ride. Time was slipping away. "The birds mean no harm," I echoed Loretta when the groups were set and facing northwest, having to raise my voice over the crying of the doves. "We're just going to run right through," I said. "Run in your group up the road until you hear me call out to stop." The doves circled, perhaps 200 of them. Loretta leaned into me and said, "Someone will be hurt," but I merely shook my head again and again with force. I picked Deanna Ellis up in my arms, worried for her ill-developed left foot, and Loretta took Carl Robeson's hand firmly, whispering something to him I couldn't hear. I gave no final command. I merely began to run, knowing this sight would spur the others to action. Deanna's arms wrapped instinctively around my neck as I ran toward the living ring and the blemished western sky beyond it. Everyone else followed. It felt so unnatural, so unclean to push one's body through a moving mass of usually docile creatures that several of the children slowed before the moment of unavoidable contact. I should have foreseen it. I had made sure that my group would be the first to run through, so Loretta and Kevin would see what should be done, though I myself, having witnessed this phenomenon just once, and entirely alone, felt much apprehension. I put one hand over little Deanna's eyes and broke the circle. 2 of the doves struck me hard on my right side at chest level, but lacking true aggression, their delicate bodies merely caromed off. Somehow the sounds of their cries and their flapping wings so much like the riffling pages of a study book, were more awful than their strike. Amy Byatt, however, was struck directly in the side of the neck as she ran beside me, and it threw her off balance. She was crying and holding her throat when we emerged on the other side of the ring, and I grabbed her hand and knelt only briefly to encourage her to keep going. Deanna's tears had begun to flow as well, but silently. I turned to see Tom Dell waving his arms frantically as he went, and one other boy had hauled the top of his coat over his head to protect himself. Several of the children screamed as the birds' bodies struck them, but no one actually stopped short at the critical moment, and no one was left behind. Nicholas Berg took the hardest blow, moving too slowly and allowing the bird's momentum to redirect his body, undersized for his age. He became blind enough in the mass to run off course and be knocked down hard by a bigger boy, breaking his spectacles. But then we were all free of the circle, whose motion the doves continued to propel at the same senseless pace, though I believe no more were joining it. It was 50 more yards to the crossroads, whose outline was only faintly visible under the snow. There was a general din of vocal panic among the children that I did nothing to quell. The shaken assemblage came to an awkward stop where Schoolhouse Road met Benedictine, and I sat Deanna down on the ground and let go of Amy's hand. From this new vantage point, the strange, inky triangle floating high over the school was ever more apparent. With no concerning injuries, we needed to keep moving forward. I told Loretta and the students that we would split now, and informed Kevin I was holding him responsible for making sure each of the younger children in his charge got to their homes safely, including Deanna, who lived so very close to him. Their houses and Kimmy Wilson's were already visible just over the northern rise. "If you've forgotten anything, you absolutely will not go back," I announced. "No one will be there for you. Is there anyone who won't be able to get inside today when they get home?" No one spoke. But I had no intention of leaving any part of the situation to chance, and so told both Loretta and Kevin that they must be the last to reach home. Then I made my final directive to Loretta, the one that could make no real earthly sense to her. "Stay at Franklin's farm till I come for you, even if the weather holds," I told her. "Don't come back till then, understand?" There was no word of protest, and I knew she would obey, if only by rote deference to authority. But it was apparent then that she knew something was very wrong here. It was only when the sight of the belfry was lost behind the crossroads that I felt I had the situation under control. I began the process of guiding the children in my charge to their homes, looking back over my shoulder constantly to make sure Loretta and Kevin were indeed keeping their groups together after the divergence. To keep up the illusion of an approaching snowstorm, I made sure to move the children at an uncomfortable pace, and issued one last shout toward Loretta to be as quick as she could about this unfortunate business. At each stop along the path toward Frostmas, I intended to utter only a few words of excuse and caution to worried parents, adhering strictly to my story and answering few questions, always insisting I had to return to the schoolhouse to prepare it for the possible bad weather. Already the sky was lightening in a subtle way almost all around, the coal color giving way to slate gray, except, yes, generally over the schoolhouse, which remained threatened strangely by that deviant patch I had seen exactly once before, on a bitterly cold Sunday in November, whose memory will never leave me. There were indeed questions as I ushered Deanna Ellis to her step, and her mother emerged to receive her, and with each stop after that, there grew further concerns about my judgment. My reputation has suffered on this day, no doubt. Amy Byatt's father, standing at his well, looked at me as if I had gone mad when I sputtered out my belief that Coswell was in danger of yet another severe storm, and I cringed inwardly when Amy began to speak immediately to him of the doves, the dreadful mourning doves that were behaving so. The birds were so scary, Pa. I was relieved to hear her speak in the past tense, which seemed to lessen the chance that Corning Byatt would venture toward the schoolhouse to look for himself. Knowing the man well, I thought he would give little credence to his daughter's tale, especially as she seemed unable to express its details coherently. Our group dwindled as we curved down Rummager Road, with minimal requests to stop for breath. Toward the end, I merely gave young Richard Hines a firm push and sent him toward his house in the distance, feeling the seconds slipping away. He is a quiet boy whom Loretta is fond of for his grave determination to become a water carrier for the class, like the bigger boys, not just an oiler of the floor when it needs it. Completely obedient, he ran as fast as his little legs could carry him across the snow, his grandmother visible in a high window. She has a French first name. Is it Isabel? Watching Richard go, his lunch tin shaking, bits of snow kicking up behind him, I was already vividly imagining the damning words with which the parents are likely to speak of me this night at their supper tables. Irrational, panicky, knows nothing about the weather. He drinks. Not the same man since what he found. Winded, I turned to head back toward the schoolhouse. By the time I reached it, I was utterly exhausted. What I did not expect was how truly frightened I became only halfway there, a fear that lived beyond the mere confines of the flesh. It made me feel like a bone-weary, crumbling, senile shadow of myself, stumbling irrevocably through the snow toward a lonely death in the cold woods. But I would again face what I believed was coming, and do it alone.
Anders, my hand won't come free.
The doves had disappeared from the sky by the time I reached the schoolhouse. All was quiet. I was met beyond the creaking entrance door by soothing, dry warmth, the stove burning as faithfully as it had since the building was constructed 4 years ago. I was there the day it received its first students, just 11 of them in all. The teacher back then, Miss Bream, broke her contract a year later by deciding to marry the richest man in Tracy County. I taught the children myself until Rona was hired. Rona was 20. I had not been alone inside the building since the day the previous November when she'd come back to visit me. Then, too, oddly, it was a maintenance issue that had brought me. I had been standing near the blackboard, looking upwards, examining a growing and ominous water stain on the ceiling, when the midday sky had begun to go dark, very dark indeed. A curious formation, much like a soft, flawed triangle, had then pronounced itself high above. A quarter of an hour after that, the mourning doves had come from Hatcher Wood and had begun to circle in behavior unlike any I had ever seen. We were such different people, Rona and I. The reticent Anders Mather, who so many find so stern and uncreative, and she, so empathetic, words flowing from her pen into her journal at night in celebration of the mystical and profound all around us. She grew up in this county, had come to revere the land, and teased me about my naive romanticism of the city where I yearned to live. As a teacher, she was efficient and dutiful, but she liked to play little jokes on the students to assure them that she was their friend. One day she asked a boy whose name I can't recall to please use a bag to catch the chalk dust that rose from the beating of the erasers, for it was considered an exotic perfume for the wealthy in Charlottesville. I remember her describing to me the boy's confused expression when he peered into the bag to perceive if he had been able to collect a single mote of a detectable substance. Today, I walked to the center of the room and eased myself into one of the aisle desks I remember proctoring her from 2.5 years ago. It took no small effort to maneuver my bulk between the desktop and the chair, and physical comfort was not possible. I turned my head to the tarnished daylight coming through the windows. Dozens upon dozens of herons had collected out there on the snow, their tall, angular bodies strangely still, each facing in my direction, gray and white heads supported by long, thin necks. A fixed amount of them, it seemed. None joined this mass, and none left it. Their tiny eyes revealed neither compassion nor hostility. Beyond them, the north field stretched to the horizon. The sky still appeared leaden, dense with premature dusk. Our final argument had taken place in this room. Hours it had lasted, and ended with her in the sort of ragged tears she so hated to succumb to. They drained her so completely that when she'd fled away from me toward the rear door to cross the grounds and seal herself inside the teacherage, she stumbled and fell from sheer exhaustion. She'd angrily shrugged away my helping hand. It was the last time I ever touched her. "What you want from me is impossible," I had insisted again and again. An inaccurate and self-serving choice of words, but we were both so tired and logic-addled by then it hardly mattered. She locked the teacherage door to me and would not come out, no matter how I entreated her. Just as she had in November, nearly a year after that argument, Rona appeared now in the distance, coming to me across the packed snow. I rose from the desk and moved closer to the window, the floorboards beneath me responding with a groan and faint cracking sound. She progressed slowly towards the schoolhouse, having to drag her awkward burden all by herself. It was a 4-wheeled cart of the type used by many families in Causewell to carry water, coal, caged chickens. She wore the dress I'd bought her just days before the great snowstorm had come. She told no one the dress was my gift, of course, even though rumors about us had been brewing for months. That would have been blatantly indiscreet. It was not my role now to go out there and help her pull. I understood this implicitly. My role, as it had been when the same scene had played out for me in November, was to watch and wait. Not a single gangly heron turned its head to notice Rona as she came ever closer to their gathering, the cart trembling with every bump, its wheels becoming caked with snow. It had been my intention back then, after our argument, to go back to the teacherage in the morning, when I trusted Rona's strength would have returned. I believe the reason I did not wake fully when the wind rose in such an alarming way overnight was that its sounds against my window pane merged cruelly into a dream I had of being lost and alone in a haunted castle. By the time I awoke at dawn, the blizzard had become ruthless, utterly unyielding. I forced myself out into that almost unearthly white blur toward the teacherage, for her sake alone. I would never make the mistake of living that far away from it again. Today, the herons allowed themselves for the second time to be peacefully parted by Rona's path, and again she stopped in the middle of them, as if feeling protected there, and looked toward me from perhaps 6 yards away. I felt her gaze powerfully through the window glass, locking me in place like a frightened pupil waiting to be chastised. The afternoon light, strong despite the injured sky, made her face perfectly vivid. Her nose was eroded, yet bulbous, and utterly blackened. Each of her facial features was similarly exaggerated and distended, seeming to pull in different directions. Freezing to death had also drawn her left eye upward in a questioning smirk, while the lower part of her mouth had pulled away to reveal every detail of the bottom row of her teeth, locking her face in something between a smile and a shriek. Insistent veins in her cheeks and neck bulged with the silvery blue color I have seen depicted in grim anatomical cross-sections of the dead. If I waited in place, I believed, she would eventually turn and pull her cargo away, for this is what she had done in November when I had, upon seeing her out there, been too paralyzed with fear to move a muscle. It was as much the contents of the cart as Rona's own horrible face that I have vowed to keep from the children. Logic tells me that the appearance of these phantoms is meant only for me, but I cannot and will not chance the risk that they can be seen by others, and so I will make any effort when the sky goes dark and the mourning doves circle to get everyone away from the school. Both Rona and the herons continued to gaze in my direction, and then, finally, she did in fact turn and begin to maneuver the cart away toward the north again, causing the spindly but intimidating birds to part gently. When I'd stumbled across her body in Bernard Lively's meadow just a half-mile from the teacherage, Rona's right hand had been clutching the cart's handle, fused to it, her fingers shrinking and blackening as the hours passed. They'd cut her flesh away to free her. It was thought she might have heard a false, wind-created voice out there in the blizzard, and fearing for a child, pursued it, not understanding the gravity of what she was walking into. Here they call these plaintive cries fools' voices. Or perhaps she simply thought she could make it on foot to my house, which appeared sturdier than the teacherage, though whether it truly was, I don't know. Most certainly it could have been anything, any object at all that she reached out to seize in her final blind moments in the storm, the worst in the county's history, so they say. The extremity of her fear and physical torment would have made her disoriented. But this particular object would turn out to have use on both her subsequent visits to me. The 3 small, frozen bodies the cart contained were kept in by a stout rectangle of wooden rails. Why did Rona return to me on this day in January? And why did she that first time 8 weeks ago? 2 separate days with no meaning to either of us that I can understand. Unless in the course of our time together I had indeed given short attention to some special meaning that she never released from her own memory. And when will the next day be? For it seems certain that odd triangle in the sky will return, and once again we will meet. Rona departed, pulling the frozen corpses of 3 small, nameless children away from me. If she had expressed a wish for a single son or daughter back then, would I have reacted so intensely, protested against her dream with such vehemence over the course of weeks? Was 3 the number that truly struck at my fear of losing my self-determination? Or is 3 simply all the children the little cart can hold. The herons began to disperse, taking wing first individually and then in groups with silent fluidity, creating a patchwork of bodies in the sky that obscured my view of Rona's return to some place beyond the rise. I glimpsed, ever so briefly, a black hole that frost had eaten through one of the children's cheeks, and one of his ice-encrusted hands shaking and bouncing as it dangled slightly over the railing of the cart. I stayed inside the schoolhouse until the light began to drain from the sky. The stove behind me continued to make its steady, gentle hissing sound. I sat at Loretta's desk and put my head in my hands and pondered the logic of ghosts. Is it just possible, I think on this night before another school day, that she comes out of love, however it is defined in the realm beyond this one? For just as the physical laws of phantoms defy all our understanding, could it be that their emotions are also wholly transformed, even purified, so that to show me the awful traces of mortal death is, to Rona, an expression of enduring faith in us, an invitation to join her and the children we might have had in a place where we will all transcend fear, cold, and rot. Look at me, she might be trying to say. You see, it's as I once told you. There is nothing that can break us. But no, the simplest answer is the one I feel most strongly in my bones. She has chosen to taunt the stubbornness of a man who will seemingly go to any length to protect children, yet vehemently refused to raise his own. I suppose I'm foolish to think that Rona will ever show herself to the students, for among her many virtues, one was proven to me so many times I had come to revere her for it, and this was discretion. But God, what if the sky darkens one day in the spring, and I again rush to the schoolhouse to hurry everyone to the crossroads, again risking my reputation and employment, and we all hear, before the children can even be taken out the front, a knock at that rain-warped door, preceded by the small squeaking of a handcart's wheel